Hi, my name is Örjan Nilsen, and I'm the blogger from Traditional Taekwondo Ramblings. Have you ever wondered about why the different Korean martial arts use several different terms for their forms? They use Hyeong, Poomse, and Tul, depending on what kind of Taekwondo or martial arts organization that they belong to. I don't know about you, but when I first learned about the different words, Hyeong, Tul, and Poomsae, I always wondered why. Why do they use different terms for their forms? They all relate to the solo performance of basic techniques. So, what do these words mean, and who uses it, and why? And if you haven't wondered about it, perhaps now you do. When you finished watching this clip, you'll hopefully learn what the different words mean. We'll take a closer look on both Hyung and Tul, and there's actually two kinds of Poomsae, which is pronounced the same way, but they have a slightly different meaning because in 1987 they changed the name. So keep watching this clip and it will all make sense in the end. Hopefully. Now, if you do learn something from this clip, and I really hope you do, because that's why I'm actually making this clip, and you enjoyed the information, I hope that you can subscribe to my channel or maybe share the video with that one friend you have that really likes Taekwondo, and perhaps he's a Taekwondo nerd like you and me. And with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into it. Now, the first word that I'm going to talk about is the Korean word Hyung. And the reason why I'm starting out with that word is because that's, to my knowledge, the oldest word for martial arts forms that the Koreans used. In Japanese, it's pronounced kata. So the word Hyung and kata is identical. It's just the Korean way to pronounce the Japanese word for kata. And the reason why that they use the same word as in karate is an historical issue. Taekwondo was, or modern Taekwondo was built upon Shotokan and Shito-ryu and Shudokan karate. So the Koreans, they studied Chinese martial arts in Manchuria and in Japan, and later they brought what they knew back to Korea. So in the 1940s, 50s and 60s they made their own schools, or kwan, and they just pronounced and taught what they knew to the Korean audience. So they imported the terms for forms from their martial arts, which was karate, and they used kata, so they pronounced it as Hyung. Now, if you look up the Korean word for Hyung in a dictionary, you'll get very many different results. One of the first one that I got was Hyung, older brother. But the one that we are talking about when we talk about the solo performance of basic techniques strung together is has a Chinese character, or hanja, and it means type, model, or form. It's a template, which is what we're talking about. Now, being one of the older terms for martial arts forms in Korea, it doesn't matter what kind of organization or kwan or school or style. If they had a solo performance of basic techniques strung together, They would probably use Hyung in their early days. That's true for all of the Kwan. Mudu Kwan, Chungdu Kwan, Chidu Kwan, you name it. All of them used Hyung for their forms. And the ITF in the beginning, they also used Hyung. And even the Cookie one, when they first introduced their own martial forms, Palgue and the Yudanja forms, they were also called Hyung until they made their own term Poomse for their martial arts forms. So depending on when you first learned the form, Warang Tul, which it's known as today, would be Warang Hyung, or like in our Cookie Taekwondo or Cookie One Taekwondo style, you have Koryo, which we today call Koryo Poomse, but originally it was called Koryo Hyung. So it doesn't really matter what kind of form set that you were training, it was all Hyung. And that's also true for the older Hyung, like Cholgi and Banwol Hyung or Kungsukun Hyung. They were all called Hyung. So today you usually see Hyung used in the Tangsudo or organizations that broke off from either the Cookie One or Korean Taekwondo Association at an early date, or they broke off from the ITF or Changhun Taekwondo in the early days. Some prefer Hyung because it's the original term, and if these instructors or clubs, dojang or whatever you want to call it, import other forms, they would usually just say the name of this imported form and use their own term Hyung. So depending on where you study, you can study Koryo Hyung or Chonji Hyung or Cholgi Hyung, or you can learn all three of them under the name Hyung. So if you're practicing Dangsudo or Subakdo or Kungsudo, you're probably using Hyung for your forms. Likewise, I know the Global Taekwondo Federation used Hyung, at least they used to. But today, the ITF, the modern ITF, use Tul. And Tul, unlike Hyung, is not an imported word. As far as I know, Tul has no hanja. It's a pure Korean word. And likewise, as far as I know, Choi Hong-hee is the guy behind that term for forms. Now, Tul, you can also translate with a form or mold, but the translation that the man himself used was pattern. Now, he believed that you could have very good basic techniques and you could have strong kicks and everything, but the patterns could still be done in a way that was not very good or to his liking. So you could have good techniques or form, but your patterns could still be off. So he used patterns consistently in his translations from I believe he used it for as a translation from Hyung in his early days as well. He used Hyung in his early books. It wasn't until it was between 1975 and 1978. I can definitely say that after 1978 he used Tul, but in his 1965 publication he used Hyung like everybody else did. Now that we talked about Hyung and Tul, We're now going to go over to the words that my organization, or the organization that I practice within, uses, which is Poomse. And like I said in the introduction, there are two kinds of Poomse, which is pronounced the same way, but it's written slightly different. Now, the cookie one used Hyung as well in the beginning, or the Korean Taekwondo Association did at least. And so the first forms that they made, the Palgwe and the Yudanja Poomse, were named Hyung in the beginning. At the time of the first publication of their forms in the early 70s, they had come up with a new term which they had labeled Poomse. Now today you would spell Poomse, or the se part, with a S-A-E, but at that time they used only S-E. So it's pronounced the same way, but it's a different meaning behind the term. Now, the original term that they used until 1987 was a borrowed term. Poomse had a Chinese character, or two Chinese characters, Poom and Se. Now, the Poom part could mean products, so that would be the techniques themselves, something that you make, produce a product. Now, the Se in the original term would mean strength or quality. So you would practice Poomse to make your techniques or your Taekwondo into good quality martial arts. Another way to translate the original term for Se is power. So you could also say that you would practice Poomse to make your Taekwondo into a powerful martial art as well. So the word Poomse, or the original term at least, was more to do with the why you practice, or the effect of practicing Poomse, or martial forms. Now, in 1987, they had a meeting, several meetings in fact, and they had a continual effort to make Taekwondo into Korean martial art. So, having a term that had a foreign influence, or a borrowed term with Chinese characters, wouldn't do for a national Korean martial art. So, they renamed the term into Poomse, which they now spelled S-A-E instead of S-E, as they did in the original term. So the new term does not have a Chinese character, or Chinese characters, or Hanja. Now, according to the WTF, or WT, which they call themselves now because they didn't like the WTF being made fun of, they say that Poom means rank, so as in Poomye. So now it's rank, and Se is a shortened form for Myeongse, which means the look of, or system. So now you have a term that's more akin to the surface level, or the look of movements, the movements system of rank promotion. So many masters like the older term, and I have to agree. I like the older term Poomse better than the new term Poomse, but since I'm writing for an international audience, I usually use the SAE, or the modern term, when writing. But in my personal teaching, I make the difference. So to quickly recap, Hyung is the oldest term for martial arts forms in Korean, and it was imported from their original martial arts that they practiced in China and in Japan, Chinese martial arts and Okinawan karate. And it's pronounced kata in Japanese. So Hyung and kata is the same exact word, it's just pronounced in two different languages. And then you have Tul, which means pattern and is used by the ITF or those styles that comes from the ITF or Changhun Taekwondo, and is the term that Choi Hong-hee himself made, and he translated it with pattern instead of form. And then you have the original term for Poomse and the new term Poomse, which is the Kukiwon and the Korean Taekwondo Association and the WT's preferred term for martial arts forms. So I hope you enjoyed this chat. It was very difficult, or more difficult than I suspected to speak in English. I'm Norwegian. But it was a fun challenge. I hope you enjoyed the content, and if you do, please subscribe if you haven't already done so, and or share the video with that one friend that you have who's also a Taekwondo nerd. We all have one who practice Taekwondo. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again. Bye!